Hello and welcome to another episode of Cracking the Cryptic. We're going to go back to basics again, just for those who might not know. We're going to really look at the makeup of what a cryptic clue is and what it's trying to do. So I'm looking at today's Quick Cryptic puzzle from the Times. It's largely done. We've got a corner to finish off now. And we'll start with 12 across. Now, it may help to have letters in the grid. That may get your mind thinking about the right sort of thing straight away. And the clue at 12 across is fruit, some illicit anger inexplicably. So it's a 9-letter word. We can see that it begins with T something N. It's got an I towards the end. Now, the key thing to remember about all cryptic clues is that they contain a definition of the answer, either at the beginning or the end. That is an almost universal rule, but we can expect it every time in this puzzle. And here we have either fruit at one end or probably inexplicably at the other. The definition can be more than one word, but the punctuation seems to suggest it's likely to be one of those too. Now, inexplicably would be quite a hard word to find a synonym for. It might have to end in ly as well to be another adverb. And clearly it's possible for a word to begin T something N and end in ILY. But certainly nothing comes to mind. However, I can think of a fruit straight away which begins T something N and has an I towards the end. And although this could mean to fruit or fruit in the singular or plural, we're going to get some extra help, even if we haven't thought of the word, from the rest of the clue, which will give us the wordplay. It'll give us the reasons why the letters in the answer are there. So what it says is some illicit anger inexplicably. And the word some is often a very useful cue to find the answer hidden in this string of letters following. And that's how it works here. So we're looking for a fruit that's hidden in illicit anger inexplicably. And what I mean by hidden in is all the letters in the right order all together. And if you look carefully, starting with the T of illicit, you can see that the next 8 letters after that with it spell out tangerine, and that's the fruit we were looking for there. Well done if you thought of it just from the letters in the grid, and well done if you solved it from the clue. Now we'll move on to 8 down. We've got a lot of letters in this, but it's quite an odd shaped phrase. The numbers in brackets in the clue say 2 and 4-6. So it starts with a 2-letter word, and then there's a 4-6 part to this phrase. And the clue says, get in a mess, but look appropriate for conference, ? Now this isn't very straightforward, but again, we make sure that we know that there's a definition either at one end or the other. So it could be conference, or it could be get in a mess. And again, the letters in the grid might help you figure that one out. It's certainly worth concentrating on the last 6 letters, something H, something P, something D. I don't think there are many ways that that can be turned into a word. And in a 4-6 word, almost certainly both halves will be actual words in their own right. So, get in a mess. So, shaped is the word I'm thinking of that could fit there. So, it would be good to come up with a phrase that ends in shaped, quite a short phrase. And then good to justify it if we can think of it. It probably means get in a mess. And good to justify it by using the rest of the clue, look appropriate for conference. And the actual answer is go pear-shaped, which is a reasonably modern phrase meaning to go badly wrong. And why does that look appropriate for conference? Well, note the capital C on conference. And this does require a little bit of general knowledge. There is one type of pair called a conference pair. And the rest of that clue is a kind of pun on being pear-shaped would mean you were appropriate to be a conference pair if you were pear-shaped. So that's the answer. It's kind of a joke of a clue, but well done if you saw the way to get it. Certainly it's worth focusing. If you think the definition is getting a mess, it's worth focusing on what could conference be supplying to the clue. And there are a number of synonyms for conference, but none of them were needed here. We needed to know what conference could be a type of, and that's quite an unusual use of the word. So we'll move on to 10 across. Cutter takes policeman across river. Now normally, obviously, we can decide that the definition will either be cutter or river, but that doesn't necessarily narrow it down. Cutter can mean a number of things, including a type of ship, which is what's implied by the surface reading of this clue, or something that cuts things. And a river, obviously there's a large number of rivers in the world. Nobody can be expected to know all the names of all of them. So you might be a bit nervous about that. But it can also be the letter R, and that might be useful here. What we need to do very often in crosswords is think of a short synonym, because the wordplay parts especially will be made up of synonyms or abbreviations that represent the words in the clue. And what I would normally think of for a policeman, the first synonym that would come to mind, and there are several, but the first one that would come to mind is cop. But in fact, for once, we don't need the shortest synonym. So what is cop short for, or how did it originate? And the answer is it came from the word copper, one of the earlier words for policeman that's survived all this time. And if we put that word for a policeman across, i.e. we kind of lie it across the letter R for river, we do get something that can mean a cutter. And that must be the answer, therefore, cropper. So in the sense of someone cutting crops, a cropper is somebody who does the cutting. And as I say, it would have helped to have thought of cop, because if you put an R in cop, you get crop, and that kind of leads you to the answer. But it actually needed a slightly longer version of a policeman than cop. As I say, it needed copper. Now, 7 down, Mrs. Simpson's spread. Now, Mrs. Simpson is a phrase that immediately to most people means Wallace Simpson, who married King Edward VIII and led to his abdication. But there is another Mrs. Simpson known to many people, known to, I want to say known to us all. I guess you might not have heard of her. But the rest of the clue is spread. And what we're looking for here is something that can mean both that Mrs. Simpson and spread. Now, spread can be a verb, but it can also be a noun. It can be an adjective as well, but it can also be a noun, in which case it's something that you spread on something. And I hope you've thought about The Simpsons, in which the name of Homer's wife, Mrs. Simpson, is of course Marge, which is short for margarine, and another definition for that is spread. So it's a kind of double definition, although I guess the first definition is more a pun again. Nice answer, and not the first time I've seen Marge clued as Mrs. Simpson, but a nice bit of very slight misdirection about the clue. Now, there may be younger people who haven't heard of Wallace Simpson so much and are very familiar with Bart and Lisa and their mum. So for them, that's not so cryptic. It's fairly straightforward, but at least they know also that it gives the right answer. And then finally, we can finish off with 5 across. Rip off raincoats to throw back. And the clue there sounds like it's talking about tearing off bits of clothing and throwing them back. But in fact, to throw back is being used as an indication of what you do with a word. You have to throw a word for raincoats back, and that will give you something that means rip off. And again, the words in the grid, the letters in the grid are very helpful here, showing the value of getting some solving done first. The whole crossword becomes a lot easier. So we need a word that means rip off, something C, something M. And it will similarly be raincoats thrown backwards, as I say. And if we put in scam, we can see that that is Macs, Macintoshes, thrown backwards. MACS becomes SCAM, which is the word scam, meaning a rip-off or to rip someone off, to scam someone. So again, that's just an introduction, if you like, to cryptic clues and how they work, how you fill in answers. Good to look for short synonyms. Again, there in that clue, we needed a short synonym for a raincoat, and Mac is kind of the shortest one there is. We needed a short synonym for rip-off. Scam's not quite as short as con, perhaps, but it's still very short. And that's often the way to go when you're trying to solve. But certainly the key thing to remember is there will be a definition at one end, and the rest of the clue will tell you why. It'll give you the wordplay that you're looking for. So there we go. Thank you for watching, and hope to see you again next time on Cracking the Cryptic. It's been fun.